Daily Dad. Welcome to the channel. Thomas Jefferson was an American lawyer, architect, philosopher, and tobacco planter. He was the first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and the third President of the United States of America. Jefferson was born in Shadwell, Virginia on April 13, 1743. His father, Peter Jefferson, owned a tobacco farm and was a cartographer and surveyor. His mother, Jane Randolph Jefferson, was an intelligent and well-educated woman. She raised young Jefferson and his 7 siblings in a prosperous and cultured setting. In 1757, when Thomas Jefferson was 14 years of age, his father died. The weight of his father's business responsibilities fell on the teenage Thomas, which included management of nearly 5,000 acres, 66 slaves, and a large paid staff. Thomas Jefferson received his education at William & Mary, where it was said that he relished the daily routine of studying diligently for 15 hours, followed by 2 more hours of violin practice. When he graduated from college, he began work as a lawyer. Jefferson began clearing and preparing a plot of land for construction. He had an eye for architecture, and he began designing an elegant brick mansion on a hilltop overlooking his vast estate. Jefferson not only designed the home, but the elaborate gardens as well. Jefferson filled Monticello, which means little mountain in Italian, with fine art, furniture, gadgets, and items of cultural significance. In 1772, he married his third cousin, the widow Martha Wells Skelton, and they lived in the mansion on the hill. Martha was an intelligent woman who spent her time reading and playing the piano. Often Jefferson would join her playing the violin. They had 6 children, but only 2 survived into adulthood. Their marriage was the happiest time of Jefferson's life. Soon after the birth of their last child, 10 years into their marriage, she grew ill and died at the age of 33. A grief-stricken Jefferson secluded himself in his home for 3 weeks. He never remarried. In 1775, Thomas Jefferson became the delegate to the Continental Congress from Virginia. The Continental Congress was in essence the national government for the 13 colonies before they were a nation. This group of delegates spoke and acted on behalf of the 13 British American colonies. Jefferson's obvious contribution to the group was as contributor and the main author of the Declaration of Independence. In 1777, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. This statute divorces Virginia from the Church of England, forbids the state from having a sponsored church, and guarantees freedom for people of all faiths to freely express their faith. It became Virginia law in 1786, and it is a forerunner to the language used in the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause expressed in the First Amendment. In 1778, Jefferson was elected for 2 one-year terms as the governor of Virginia, where he moved the capital to Richmond and passed measures on public education, religious freedom, and inheritance laws. After the Revolutionary War was won and a peace treaty was signed, Jefferson was appointed to the Congress of the Confederation, which is simply now called Congress. His major impact was plotting the borders for 9 new states northwest of the Ohio River and ensuring that slavery would be illegal in all of those states. After his congressional term was complete, Congress sent Jefferson to Paris for 5 years. As the minister to France, he negotiated treaties and crafted United States foreign policy. In 1789, Thomas Jefferson returned to the United States and accepted George Washington's invitation to be the first Secretary of State. While Secretary of State, Jefferson consistently was at odds with Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury. They fought over the location of the national capital and whether there should be a national debt and whether there should be a national bank. Their fight over Hamilton's plan to establish national credit and a national bank was so bitter that Washington nearly removed Jefferson from his position. Jefferson chose to resign on his own terms. In the election of 1796, Thomas Jefferson came in second to John Adams, and as were the rules at that time, became the second Vice President of the United States. The presidential election of 1800s was bitter. John Adams had lost popularity over foreign affairs issues, raised taxes, and acts that gave the government powers over its citizens. He was publicly accused of being a secret monarchist, desiring to be a king. Adams' party, the Federalists, called Jefferson a godless libertine and accused him of loving the French. In the end, Jefferson won the Electoral College and became the third president of the United States. During Thomas Jefferson's 2 terms as president, he lowered the national debt from $83 million to $57 million. He lowered taxes. He cut spending. He founded the United States Military Academy at West Point. He named the first librarian of Congress, and he outlined a new set of rules and limitations for the military. After Jefferson completed his 2nd term as president, he returned to Monticello. He spent his time pursuing gardening, reading, playing music, and architecture. He founded the University of Virginia, designed its buildings, planned its curriculum, and served as its first rector. Jefferson died on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1826, at the age of 83. He had accumulated so much debt that Monticello and all he owned was sold at auction. Since Jefferson's time, controversy has risen around his involvement with slavery. His relationship with slavery is full of hypocrisy and contradiction. He added an anti-slavery clause to the Declaration of Independence and was irate when it was removed from the document before approval. While in Congress, he wrote an ordinance banning slavery in all of the nation's new territories, and this became the law for all of the Northwest. While governor of Virginia, he passed anti-slavery laws. He also put great effort into decreasing Virginia's reliance on crops that were heavily dependent on labor, specifically tobacco, and encouraged the production of wheat, sugar, olive trees, and grapes, which were not labor-intensive, and he thought this would lessen the need for slaves. He believed it was the law of nature that every man had a right to personal liberty, and that slavery was contrary to that natural law. He called slavery a moral depravity and a hideous blot. He wrote that it was the greatest threat of the survival of our nation. And while it's true that Thomas Jefferson acted, wrote, spoke, and passed legislation as an opponent to slavery, he also profited directly from its existence. Throughout his lifetime, over 600 slaves were under the ownership of Thomas Jefferson. He wrote that black people were inferior to white people and they were as incapable as children. His complicated relationship with Sally Hennings, a slave that Jefferson claimed ownership over, has magnified the indecency. Evidence seems to show that their relationship began when she was 14 and Jefferson was 44. Oral history combined with DNA evidence from surviving descendants revealed that Jefferson most likely fathered multiple children with Hennings. This corrupted history has tainted Thomas Jefferson's legacy. This has provoked rebranding of public schools bearing his name and statues of his likeness being toppled. Thomas Jefferson was the first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and the third President of the United States of America. His impact on personal liberty and religious freedom is colossal. He founded the University of Virginia, penned the Declaration of Independence, and was hailed as an architect of the American Revolution. His likeness appears on the nickel and is carved in stone on Mount Rushmore. Please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. It's so nice when you share. Thanks for visiting. Classically, Dad.